Hello and welcome to today's webinar on writing a register style sketch. My name is Ginevra Morse. I'm the Vice President of Education and Programming at American Ancestors. I will be your moderator for today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is Senior Genealogist at the Newbury Street Press, Kyle Hurst. Kyle holds a BA in both history and anthropology from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and a master's certificate in museum studies from Tufts University. After 2 years as a volunteer, Kyle joined American Ancestors in 2008, and for several years, a member of the research services team, she now focuses on research in the Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, New England, and various European countries. She's the author of several genealogies, including Ancestors and Descendants of Charles Le Caron and Victoire Sprague, which won the 2020 National Genealogical Society Award for Excellence in Genealogy and Family History. Now, whether you just want to write about your grandparents, write an article, or compile an entire book, the register style is a widely used genealogical format that has been used for more than 150 years. Moving from the past toward the future, generation by generation, the basic building block of the system is that family sketch, treating a couple and their children in an organized and interesting way. So today, Kyle will demonstrate how to use our new register style template, which is available on our website, and also present and how to present your family history research in an understandable way. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is no syllabus for this session, but as I mentioned, you can access that template for free on our website, and I'll also link to that in our follow-up email after today's broadcast. And we are recording this event, and starting later today, you can also freely go back and review any of the content from the presentation on our website and YouTube channel. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Kyle.
Thank you, Ginevra. As you heard, my job title includes the words genealogist and press, which really clues you into what it is that I do. The majority of my time is spent researching and writing genealogies. I consider my purpose to take what's known and discovered about particular families and mold all of that into recognizable formats so that the information can be shared with a wider audience. Learning one of those formats, that's exactly what we're here for today. At our website, americanancestors.org, you can find a subject guide on writing and publishing for free at this URL. This includes the video, 10 Steps to Writing and Publishing Your Family History. Based on that list, we're jumping right into step 5, write and cite. As most of you know, there are 2 basic formats for presenting family information, register style and Onentafel. The former comes forward from the past towards the present, while the latter goes back in time towards the earlier ancestors. They provide helpful ways of organizing and presenting family data, so you may well want to be using one of these formats to at least put together the skeleton of your family history. For this webinar, our focus is on that descendancy format. We refer to this as register style because it was developed for the New England Historical and Genealogical Register. As you heard, this format has been used for over 150 years. Clearly, then, it is standing the test of time as being an efficient way to organize and present genealogical information in writing. In this format, you begin in the past and move forward toward or even to the present, tracing some or all of the descendants of one person. The backbone of this system is a family group, typically consisting of one couple and their children, as in this example. Not uncommon, though, we may see a person with more than one spouse and sets of children from each. Basically, a register-style family group is the immediate, not extended family. In register style, you give each descendant that you plan to discuss an identification number and then include as much vital data as possible for each person. To write a sketch, start with the person who has that identification number, and we include information for that person and his or her spouses, their full names, vital statistics, the places and dates. At the end of the sketch, we present the children with their full names, vital statistics, and we give identification numbers to any child who will be treated in full. Usually that means someone who has offspring of their own. Of course, there are variations to this format, but for this session, let's focus on the basics. To make it easy for readers to find each family group, we have to organize individual family sketches into the whole. By doing so, we're showing readers how each person and family group are related to the others who are being included in this article or book. And we do this by assigning a number to each person with an individual entry. The register style really only has a few key rules for how to assign those numbers in order to more efficiently guide both the writer, ourselves, and our readers into tracing a person's line of descent. In register style, to assign an identification number for each main person, the first person numbered is the earliest ancestor who is being discussed. Most commonly here in America, the immigrant ancestor. That person is assigned number 1. For person 1, you will then go to their child list and assign number 2 for as many sequential numbers as necessary to the child or children of person 1 who you plan to carry forward. Again, that means the children who will have their own genealogical sketch, in addition to having been listed in the among the parents' children. Usually, you only carry forward children who have offspring of their own to carry on that line of descent. This makes it easier to find that new sketch. You place the number 2 in front of the child's name, and then add number 2 in front of that person's name to start out their genealogical sketch. The numbers continue consecutively for each person who becomes a subject of a genealogical sketch. Let's look at some examples to make this a bit more clear. This is from an article published last year in the New England Historical and Genealogical Register. We're looking at 2 consecutive sketches. From the lineage line, that's the names italicized in parentheses, we can see that Elizabeth and William are siblings in the 4th generation of this Roch family. Each identification number picks up where the previous left off, meaning that since Elizabeth was older and therefore listed first among their father's children, she had the lower number, 6, while her brother, born 2 years later, was numbered 7. Going forward, each of Elizabeth's children have been assigned consecutive numbers. Her last child, named Benjamin Rodman, was assigned 15. So then to continue consecutively, once you move over to William's children, we have his first child receiving the assigned number 16. Typical register style texts do not assign numbers to every child, only those who will be carried forward to have their own sketches. So you see here that the second and third child of Elizabeth and the second child of William do not have numbers, but instead have more detailed data here within the list of children. We use that same identification number to lead the genealogical sketch. Sarah was the 16th person assigned a number in this genealogy. The number 16 goes in front of her name both when she is listed with her parents and then when she becomes the subject of the sketch later in the article. Note how we just have her birth when she's with her parents, and then flesh out all of the vital statistics and even some biography when Sarah becomes the subject of her own sketch. It is very, very important that these numbers match. Sarah must be number 16 in both places. That is the core of register style numbering system. Now, Word does have a function that helps us with automatically numbering in register style. As long as we bookmark the numbers, we can link each person's appearance in the child list with their genealogical sketch. If you would like specific instructions on how to do this, please refer to our book, The Guide to Genealogical Writing, or to the portable genealogist on genealogical numbering. I will not be demonstrating this, nor is it set up in the template. Truthfully, it isn't very advisable for smaller projects. Bookmarking numbers is really best for large projects, like books covering every descendant of a surname, or for projects in which the research has not yet been completed, so that newly discovered family groups may be added in later with Word automatically renumbering everyone affected by those additions. Register style has certain guidelines for how to build a genealogical sketch. And by sketch, I'm referring to the compiled information about a particular family group. Again, typically consisting of a couple and their children, perhaps even grandchildren. The basic register style sketch will be used when you're working down from an ancestor through the descendants. And I know this is going to seem extremely detailed to you, but we are going over the details here so that you understand the essentials of the format. Because once we get used to these basic principles, the patterns will help us write going forward. Now, before we go step by step in putting together a sketch, here are a few conventions we can keep in mind. At American Ancestors, we use 5 underscores to create blanks when a name is unknown. We encase maiden names and prior married names in parentheses, as in this example, and that's only when we're listing out the full name. For generational numbers, those indicate a person's generation from the immigrant or earliest ancestor. We use superscript numbers, and those generational numbers increase with each generation of descent from the immigrant, or in reverse, if we know someone who came before the immigrant, we would go backwards using letters. So A for the parent, and B for the grandparent, and so forth. Now, for the first indication of a place name, we want to be using the full place name, going from the most precise known location to the broadest jurisdiction around it. And after that first full listing, we can save space by just referring to the most specific known piece of that location. To help keep track of these conventions and keep consistent, consider making a style sheet. We do have a sample style sheet available for download on our website. But let's jump right in to these register style sketches. Here is the beginning of a basic register style sketch. The first thing you'll see is that number assigned to the main person, and it appears first in the sketch, usually followed by a period, as you see here, 23 period. After the number identifying the person comes the full name of that person. For this, you want to use first, middle, last. You can put any nicknames in quotation marks, and those will go just before the surname. And the name should be set apart from the rest of the text in styling. We use small caps. Sometimes we even make them bold. Within the name, include the generational number in superscript. If there are any middle names in addition to that first name, the generational number will go at the last of them right before the surname. Following that name, include the lineage line. This is the line of descent from the immigrant ancestor. The names are italicized and appear with generational numbers. The surname is only used to indicate when there is a change. If this lineage had contained all Gardners, we would not see a surname here. However, in this example, the line of descent goes through John's mother, Rebecca, who has the maiden name Lowell, and everyone in the lineage before her also carries that surname. Then we're ready to dive into the vital data for the subject. We bookend his or her life with the birth followed by death. You can add baptism and burial in here as well. For the dates, we use the format date, month, year. And notice how everything is spelled out without abbreviation for this main sketch. After the birth and death data, we move on to the marriage and spousal information. This can remain in the same line, or you could begin a new paragraph. We keep the same pattern of place followed by date. And then we have the spouse's name set apart in the same manner as the subject. In this case, that's small caps. Then we bookend the spouse's life, listing birth and death. We also want to include the spouse's parents here. If they are a married couple, we list the father's first name, the word and then the mother's first name, the mother's maiden name in parentheses, and then finish with the shared surname. These parents' names can appear after the marriage line, after the birth, or after the death. Just try to remain consistent in your placement. Like with the subject and spouse, we also need to list the children. We begin with the children's intro. This typically reads children of, and then list the parents you're using the same format as you had with the spouse's parents for married couples, for example. For unmarried couples, you could list the father's full name, the word and then the mother's full name without using parentheses. We'll discuss more options for this line in a moment. At any rate, the intro line ends with a colon, indicating that a list will follow. In this introductory line, we remind the reader of the subject's generational number, and the first child in the list should have the subsequent generational number. Here, John is in the 8th generation, so his children are in the 9th. When listing the subject's children, we present birth order using lowercase Roman numerals. The full name of each child is given, and again presented in a distinct typography, such as small caps and a smaller typeface. The full name of the child is followed by a comma, and then abbreviated vital events, B for born, D for died, M for married, and so forth. These events are separated by semicolons. If you then add spousal data, the spouse's birth and death and parents are separated by commas rather than the semicolons. And note here that we abbreviate for months and events. We may even use these same kind of abbreviations for our citations. Basically, you can save space by doing these abbreviations, and also you can reduce the number of times that you give that place name. If all of the children were born in Boston, you could add that data to the children's intro line rather than by each child's name. But most importantly here, we want to assign the sequential identification number for any child being carried forward receiving their own sketch, and that number goes in front of the Roman numeral. Families are complicated, so you may not always see one male and one female and one set of children. Here's how we can show multiple marriages using the same pattern. List them chronologically and indicate whether the marriage is first, second, and so forth. Each marriage and spousal information is given the same treatment that we discussed earlier. And then for the children, we create separate introductory lines indicating the correct set of parents for each. Notice how the Roman numerals indicating birth order continue because all 3 of these children belong to the subject. Now, for this example, we're just pretending that the son Joseph was married more than once, just to show you how multiple marriages can be treated in the abbreviated child list. And a few more things about this child list for slightly more complicated families. Here are some of the ways we can use that child intro line to clarify relationships, like with adopted and stepchildren. Now, another issue is if certain children are known when there are indications that a couple may have had more children. In this case, the children's intro could begin with the words known children of. We can also address special circumstances for particular children within the list, like indicating twins using parentheses or commas. So once we have the names and dates, that's the subjects and spouses, birth, marriage, and death, the list of children, we're missing some extra biographical narrative, which is placed after that vital data for the subject and their spouse, but before the children's list. This biographical narrative might include information about education, military service, occupations. Many of them refer to estates like wills that list heirs. The narrative is usually chronological because we're telling the story of a subject's life. Now, sometimes, in addition to the children, you may want to include an additional generation. Perhaps you've chosen to carry forward only direct line ancestors, but want to give as much information as possible. For this, we could include a grandchild list using regular numbers, or like in this case, letters, to present their birth order. And setting their names apart is italicized here. Both of these distinctions, along with this additional indent, helps us separate out the grandchildren from the children and more clearly shows which child it is they belong to. Now, with all of these rules that I've given you, whatever you do, I beg you, do not put off adding your citations. Make a note of where your information is coming from at the time of writing so that you don't have to spend extra time later going back to fill this in. And use a citation style appropriate for your audience, bearing in mind the goal that you need to give enough information for your readers to be able to locate the source to consult for themselves. To also help you with writing in register style, make it a little easier, but keeping you more consistent at the same time, I recommend that you follow a template. Templates are great for guiding us through entering data into these genealogical sketches. We're going to type out the subject's name, he or she was born at place date, died at place date, and so forth. So we're here today to demonstrate how to use the new templates that you can download from AmericanAncestors.org. The template should be compatible with whatever version of Word you use. Keep in mind that those differing versions, and whether they're for Mac or a PC, may slightly alter how you see your options in the tabs and their ribbons up at the top. For this demonstration, I will be using a Mac, and this is the version that comes with Microsoft Office 365. If you use a PC with a similar version, it will look more like the lower screenshot. But mostly though, you can see the tabs and ribbon options are more or less the same and in the same areas. So let's go ahead and take a look at these new templates. So please bear with me as I go ahead and share my screen. All right, so from my screen, we should all be looking at our website, AmericanAncestors.org. And what I want to show you today is how we can download this template. Up at the top here, we're going across to where we see tools. And when we hover over tools, we have a drop down of options, and we're going down to register templates here. When we select register templates, we have 3 more options across the top. The one that we want, obviously, is writing and publishing. This will take us down the page exactly where we need to go. All we need to do is click on the words register style template here, and we will automatically download a copy of this template. Now, I already have this downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that and make it full screen so we can all see it better. This is indeed our template. Now, one of the things that I recommend, this template, once you download it, should be living in your downloads folder. And you may want to be moving this template to somewhere that you know you can find it later. You may also want to keep yourself a copy of this clean template instead of writing over it for your specific project. And one of the ways we can do that is if you go up to the top here, we're in the options for our Word application. And if we select File, we'll have an option for Save As. When we click Save As, we will have the option to save under the title that's going to make the most sense for us. So think along your table of contents, for example, or your project name. You can simply call this the surname project, something simple like that. As I said, it's currently in your downloads folder, so you can select a different place to put it in. That's going to make sense so that you can find it later. And you can even change the file format. Currently, it is in the basic Word document, and I would recommend keeping it there. However, we also have an option when we go to the drop down that we could create a template from the template. So if you select Word template here, which has the ending DOT as in template X, what that will do is actually put this template into your Word application. So every time you open Word, one of the options that you will have for creating a new document will be this template. But for now, we're going to get back and dive right on in to using the template as it stands. Now, with the template, with any word really, it's best, like I mentioned, since you're working with a lot of different versions, to just acclimate your eyes to what each tab has and what ribbon options are available. For the most part, we're going to stay here in the home screen, but you may want to be going into insert, for example, and adding a header, footer, or page number. You may want to use the review tab, which will give you some ability to add comments, to track changes. For us, I really want to show you a couple of little tricks in the view tab. First of all, I recommend checking off the navigation pane here. When you do that, you have several options that come up. What we're looking at right now is the thumbnails pane, and this gives you the ability to skip to different pages. The next option is your document map. This template does make use of headers. I'll come to that in a moment. But just so you know, the other options are to see your revisions and to see your search results. So going back to the document map, the first two of our headers here have odd wording. It says main text and writing a family sketch. That's because our first template is the original word register style template, which just discusses style and formatting. So these headers are part of the template that you may want to use. So you may be writing something and want to use a header. That is what this is showing you. However, going to the third heading here, we have a family sketch template. This brings us to our new section. So if you select the family sketch templates, you'll see some introductory wording here to guide you in how to use these new sketches. And then I have subheadings here. We have the traditional register sketch. That is this one. This is the basics of what we went over in the presentation. But I also provided for us a variation model. So just to show how we could be a little more detailed in how we think about these sketches, what do we do if there are multiple spouses, multiple child lists, for example. Now, another trick using the view tab while we're up here is we can split our screen. And the great thing about that is if we put our cursor in the first section, we can go to one place. And if we put our cursor in the bottom pane, we can see the other. And now we can look at these right next to each other to see the differences. So in the first option, we're only given place and date, versus in the second, we break down that place into town, county name with the county, state. And up at the top in the traditional, we've just got the word date. In the bottom, we know that that needs to be date, month, year. This split screen is also handy for you when you're working in multiple generations, because you can easily compare what you have written for a child in, say, the top pane. And then when you start to write their sketch, you can compare that you have the numbers lined up and the names presented the same way and the data with the citations matching up. But we're not going to work on that split screen for today. And we're going to go right on up to the top, back to our beginning, because I want to tell you a little bit more about how to use the original template. As I mentioned, this is all about the style itself rather than the content of a register style sketch. For this, we want to be in the home tab at the top. so that in our ribbon options here, you can see we have some stylistic options. Now, this will look a little different depending on if you're a Mac or PC. For the Mac, my arrow is here in the center. For a, and I also have a style pane here. For a PC, you may see your arrow in the corner here, and it's going to do the same thing as if I hit a style pane. What this lovely thing does is shows all of the styles that are being used. Now you can list all styles as currently. I'm going to change it to in current document because we really want to stick to what the template's telling us to be using. Now the beautiful thing about this is that each section is set up so that you don't have to worry at all about getting things lined up. You have your indents already set. Now, when you put your cursor into this area that says the word style is body text indent, and you look over at your styles, sure enough, the current style is body text indent. And if you go down here, say, this is the quotation style, and you can see that it is the quotation style, but you can also make changes there. So currently we have a quotation set apart, but say we want to change this into something that's our own words. We could go over to our list here of style options and say we want it to be in normal, or say we want to match what's above and say we want it in the body text with the indent, or we've changed our mind and we are going to have a quotation after all. Well, that's right where we can do that. These styles are able to be modified. We're not going to do that today because the point is to stick to our templates. But should you wish to modify, all you need to do is click onto the arrow by the name of the style and select modify style in this way. And you can do things like make your font change size, for example. All right, now let's dive on into using the new templates. With the new templates, you may want to do a little bit of setup at the start, make some decisions, one of which being, do you want to include that grandchild generation? If not, just go ahead and highlight that and delete, and you don't need to worry about it at all. It's gone. I can also just hit undo and it's back. I can copy and paste this to put it where I want it. For today, I'm just going to take that out and we're going to focus on the subject and their children. Now, we only give you one family group to start with, as you can see. So I highly recommend that the first thing you do is to highlight that entire family group. In this case, I'm going to right click and select copy. Now, as you can see on a Mac, the shortcut is Command C. On a PC, you'll do Control C, and this allows you to copy this text. And now we want to paste this text below. So just put your cursor where you would like that paste to be. I'm right clicking again and selecting paste. On a Mac, this is Command V as in Victor, and on your PC, it will be Control V. And now I have two family groups. I like to do this because this way I can keep the templated option above and work within the next. Now, how then do we get started with entering our data? By and large, everything we do in this template is going to be a replacement. So we have symbols. These are number symbols, or we have words. And they are both placeholders for the kind of information that needs to go in these areas. And in each case, we just want to highlight the symbol or word that we're replacing and type right on over it with our data that's relevant to our family group. And I do recommend that you start with names and numbers, as I say. Mostly because we are talking about descent, the first bit of information you are going to know is going to be a surname, the last name. And we can go ahead and fill those in in all of the relevant areas. So we can presume, if we're talking about a male carrying the line forward, that we are going to have that same surname for the subject, for the shared surname of the child list, and for each of the children. I decided to use the Davis family as a bit of an example here. This goes back to the Newbury Street Press book, An American Family, which I edited on, and the author currently proofreads for the Register. So it's a nice simple example for us here. Now, let's go back to the first name. So which Davis are we talking about? In this particular case, I'm going to start with Pearlie Bacon because I like the name. Now, we need to make sure that the name matches everywhere. So again, if you fill in the subject, I would recommend immediately filling in their name in the child intro list as well. And again, the child list, it isn't necessarily that your subject is the father. Your subject could just as easily be the mother. In this particular case, we are following the Davis family. Now, Pearlie is in the 7th generation. So we want to change out this superscript £sign with his generation 7. And again, we want to make sure that that matches in the child list line. There are 3 places that we need to make sure that we have generational numbers, and that is in the subject's name, in the subject's listing in the child's line, and then we want the subsequent generation for their eldest child. So if Pearlie is 7, his eldest child needs that number 8 to indicate that everyone in that list is the 8th generation. Now, the other place that we need generations is going to be in our lineage line here. And we will start with Pearlie's parent and work our ways backwards until we get to the immigrant. Now you can see I've used some ellipses here. That is just to indicate that we need to keep going with this line for as many generations as necessary. So in this particular case, we're going to need to have 6 listings here in the lineage line to get back to the first generation. I'm just going to plug in a little bit here. We'll ignore the middle section. And his father was James, who was in the 6th generation. So you can see we're going to go backwards. If Pearlie is 7, his father must be 6, and his grandparent 5, and so forth. Now, actually, I do want to give you a tip. Once you have this lineage line filled out, this is a good place to stop and think about whether you want to do a copy and paste for the next generation, because you've already set up everything for yourself. So again, you could do this copy and put your cursor wherever it needs to go and do your paste. And the reason is because now we have the lineage line all set up. All we need to do is add Pearlie there, because now we've moved on to his son's generation. So if we add Pearlie in there, then we just need to italicize his name and make his generation superscript, which means we need to update our numbers here. This would be the 8th generation, and it just so happens that his first son is Albert. So we would put Albert like so, and we'd have to make sure that all of the rest matches and lines up. But for now, let's stick with Pearlie. Okay, so then coming to the actual part of where we want to fill in information, we can fill in his birthplace, which was in New Hampshire. I'm not going to type the whole thing for us, but it would go town, county, state, as the case may be, depending on the information that you know. And the birth date would follow with the date, month, year. And again, we're going to fill out, see how New Hampshire is completely spelled out. April is completely spelled out. We're not doing any abbreviations at the top. So this is the essentials of how you would fill in all of this data. Now, I've put in here an option for your pronouns because we don't know whether we're following a mother's line or a father's line in any particular case. And with a name like Pearlie, it's not immediately obvious that we're talking about a male. So we would refer to our records and see whether he's being referred to as he or as a son. And then we just need to delete the extra pronoun. Now, we can put in his spouse's name, again, just highlight right over spouse name, last name, and we can type out her name with all of the style staying there. So we still have her in bold, she's still in small caps. Now, Mary is in fact female, so we would just delete the additional son there. And the same thing for our pronouns over when we talk about her birth in death. When we talk about her parents, we want to put her father's first name, her mother's first name, her mother's maiden name, and their shared surname. And again, this isn't necessarily always going to be the case that we have a traditional married spouse like this, which is why in the variation model, we can see that in some cases we might want to put the full name of one person and then the full name of the other person without combining them. Okay, so now just a quick bit about how to add in your biographical information. Naturally, we're going to type right over where it says biographical information about the person, their spouse, etc. Now, I'm just going to leave that there for now so that I can give you the fact that we have 2 lines here. So now we finished the end of a paragraph and we have our footnote there. We definitely want to have at least a footnote per paragraph. We need to put our cursor on the other side of that footnote and just hit return. And you'll see that we've stayed in body text indent. We have our automatic indent and we can continue adding more bio information. And that brings us down to the children. So I've already done a little bit of filling this in. We could continue on with Mary Frances Vining here. And you can see we have our children set up with the small caps. If we fill in their names, I have number signs out front to indicate where we want to put identification numbers, which reminds me, we didn't talk about identification numbers. So let me swing back up here to the top. So all we need to do for those identification numbers is just type right over that symbol. In this particular case, the Davis family we've been following as a direct line of descent. So it just so happens that Pearlie was the 7th person being treated and he's in the 7th generation. That isn't always the case. There may be more than one in each generation. So we could just as soon see Pearlie being the 207th person. But at any rate, the identification number goes out front there, and the same will be true of the children. As it turns out, his 2nd child is going to be number 8, and his 3rd child will be 9, and they'll carry forward. The 4th child actually is not. So all we have to do is delete that additional number. Now, when we're filling out these children, as you can see, we have our abbreviated B for born, M for married. Now, these additional children, the ones that are being carried forward, this is all the information you really need to get started. Because again, this person who, again, was Albert Davis, just to keep track, we're giving Albert this sketch down here. So we don't need to know much more about him except just a little bit of identifying information. We want to see the birth so that we see how he is in relation to his siblings, and then just to give the spouse's name so we can make sure we have the right person when we get down to the 8th generation. Otherwise, if you are not planning to carry a child forward, like the 1st child here, these are all the information that ideally you would know. You would be filling out that child's birth, death, their marriage, their spouse, their spouse's birth, their spouse's parents, their spouse's death. And then again, you can add biographical information about the child. This particular style is called Kidsmore text. So it's very easy to add in. If you were to add biographical information for Albert, for example, just put your cursor at the end and hit return, and then just select kids more text, and it automatically moves you in all of that indentation that you need. Now, to add additional children, this is often the case. We're not just going to have 4 children. What I recommend that you do is to do a copy and paste of what is already there. Now, just put your cursor at the end of the row and hit return. And you see we're lined up to give the next identification number if that's relevant. Hit tab, and we are lined up to give the next Roman numeral indicating that this is the next child in the list. And hit tab again. And here is where you're perfectly lined up to paste in your information for that next child. Now, once you have all of these children and the couples and the biographical narrative, you may assume that you are finished, but you are not. As we all know, there are all of these numbers in here indicating that there are footnotes. We do need to fill out those footnotes. So I have given you the word source to nudge you in the right direction. Please do type right over that with the actual source in whatever style is going to work the best for you. If you need to add sources, for example, here we've started a new biographical information paragraph, but we don't have a source there. We just want to go up to the tab for references and click insert footnote, and where it automatically brings us down there, and we can give our source there. And sources are separated by colons and finished with a period. So that is as easy as it is to write into these templates to make a sketch. So now let's go back and review what we've discussed today. Now, we see how these templates guide us. Let's recap the essentials of register style. In this genealogical format, we go from the past through the descendants towards the present. We write sketches for each subject, focusing on his or her family group. Each person featured in a sketch is identified with a consecutive number, and that same number must be given both when the person's listed among the children of their parents and as a subject of a sketch. To write each sketch, go ahead and download and use this register template from AmericanAncestors.org. For more guidance on writing in register style, we do publish a guide to genealogical writing, which goes into much more depth, like how to get started, how to do genealogical formatting, creating citations, and so on. A special section at the back focuses on that style, how to standardize your abbreviations, how to handle alternate spellings of names, and the like. And in addition to that writing guide, we publish 6 portable genealogists that focus on writing genealogical material. These are 4-page laminated publications with 3-hole punch, so you can put them into a binder, and they're also available as a paperback compilation. Any and all of these items can be purchased from our online store.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. Before we get to some questions, and we have a lot of questions, as we often do with the register style, I did want to let everyone know about a few upcoming events. So on February 6th, through our American Inspiration Author Series, we are happy to be hosting Lisa Belkin with her book, Genealogy of a Murder. Also starting in February, we have a 3-week online course, Demystifying DNA, Getting Started with Genetic Genealogy. And then if you'd like to learn more about writing and publishing your own family history, be sure to join us for next month's seminar on that very topic. Once you register, you'll have access to more than 5 hours worth of content, handouts, templates, that style guide that Kyle mentioned, lots of great information that you would have for the foreseeable future. And then on the 10th, we have that live Q&A with our instructor. So again, if you are interested in dedicating time to really putting down on paper or on the screen your family history, be sure to join us next month. All right, so let's get to some questions. Several people have asked, Kyle, if you don't know the earliest immigrant, or you're not sure who that is, or maybe you just don't want to start with them, how does the numbering work? Do you still start with number one, considering like kind of the earliest person that you're treating?
Yes, absolutely. Whoever is the earliest person that you want to treat, you may even be treating someone who you're just trying to show how certain folks are related to each other through a specific person, for example. You could start with that person. So, yes, your identification number does start with one always. Where it can be a little tricky is your lineage line, those generational numbers. That's a little bit different. I do go ahead and start with one if it's just the earliest person I know. It can be updated later, but that's the only place where it could be a little bit tricky. But definitely your identification number always starts with one.
Now, we also have several questions about using, some genealogical software programs export a register style, and they call it a register style report. Um, is that in fact register style? What is the benefit to using this template versus just that export?
The exports are great for getting your information all into one area if you've been using software to keep track of everything. But what I say is that it requires so much editing to get it to be consistent looking and to get it into quite the right format that usually what I will do is I will export if I have all the information in a software program, but then I'll type using that as a guide, but I'll type from scratch and do a lot of copy and pasting here or there too, if need be. But usually what the export does, it can kind of garble some things around if you haven't been consistent yourself in putting it into your software program. I haven't looked lately to see what their version of register style is, but the some of the Onondaga ones I've seen recently are not quite right. So I can only imagine that the register still isn't quite there. And also the export is going to say you were going to submit an article for the journal, the register. Those exports are going to have a lot of additional formatting and styles that is not going to play well. It's going to require the editor to completely revamp anyway. So you would be making someone else retype it instead of retyping it yourself.
Now, there are also some questions about surname spelling variations, or someone being, maybe born with one name and then adopting a different surname later in life or changing their name altogether. Any suggestions on how you deal with that?
Absolutely. Would you mind if I share my screen? I'll just type it up quick for you. Okay, so hopefully you're still seeing that I'm in the template. What you would do, especially if you're talking about a last name and a last name changing, I've been working on a project that the family has more or less been using the surname Fegley, spelled like this. But some of the earlier generations, it can be really quite different looking. So this is how you would handle that. You would just do a slash, and you can do a slash for as many times as you like. Sometimes it can be as simple as, say, the surname is Child, but they inconsistently add an S. You could put it in parentheses like that. Or again, use the slash version and add the S on like that. That is often what I will do. Sometimes I will do something like, if I go down to the variation model here, say you have somebody's name like my grandmother always went by the name Lena, and the only time she didn't was when she was baptized. So I might say something like, Anne was baptized as, and then fill in um, the name there. So it kind of depends on how consistently that name is used. And if it's just a spelling variation, then I definitely will do the slash version. And if you are in your biographical section, for example, and you have a situation where, oh, this one particular record spelled it Davies instead of Davis, put the in quotation marks like that to differentiate that it isn't always Davis. It was just written as Davies so that someone can find it in that record.
And let's see, another question. Does the spouse of the subject ever get a number?
The spouse would not get an identification number in register style. They do in a non-entafel, but not in a register. But what the spouse might get is a generational number. This happens in situations like in the Mayflower Descendant Journal, where both parties might be descendant from a Mayflower passenger. So you may have the superscript number added in here and a lineage line added for that spouse.
And several people have asked this, and you mentioned it briefly, but what do you do if you find someone after you've already numbered everyone, manually numbered everyone? What do you do? And is there a way around it?
Right. Basically, the way around it would be depending on your goal for your project. If your goal is to equally treat every single descendant, then I highly recommend that you use the automated numbering bookmarking system from the start so that you can uh, do an automatic update. But if it is not that kind of situation, this is where you may want to take advantage of keeping someone just in the child list and maybe even including their children as a grandchild list instead of bringing that person out to have their own um, entry. So that may be one way around renumbering everyone. Otherwise, from wherever that person tucks into the lineage, that is going to have to, everyone thereafter would need to be renumbered.
And if you are interested in learning how to do that genealogical numbering, that automatic, the bookmarking within Word, I think as Kyle mentioned, we do have a portable genealogist available for sale on our online bookstore that talks about genealogical numbering and how you go about bookmarking. Um, let's see, a few other questions. A few people have also asked, is it confusing when you use superscript for both generation numbers and footnote numbers?
It can be, yes. And this is going to speak to how you're going to publish, basically. If you're going to publish in a journal like the Register, they have a system where they put the footnote or endnote numbers in brackets, for example. So that's something that happens on the editing and design phase. When you're working in the document yourself, it's usually not that confusing because you have those superscripts attached to a name when it's a generational number, and it's never really right after a first name when you're putting in your footnotes or endnotes.
Um, a few people have asked about kind of the biographical information. Is there a limit to what I guess that's up to you, but I mean, is there kind of a sweet spot for how much information you give?
Well, again, it depends on your project. Who is your audience? If you are writing something for a journal, they're going to have page and word limits because of spacing. If you're writing a book for yourself, then it's up to you how long you want it to be. I myself write a lot, and I really wish there were a limit so I wouldn't have to keep going and adding all the details in like I like to do.
Um, let's see. And Mark asks, are there guidelines or rules for listing males first and females second in the main couple?
It in the traditional manner, father leads mother. Genealogy in general has been, at least in the West, very focused on the male lines with those surnames because it's the females who change their names to match the males that they marry. And it's the females who take their father's name. So it is a patriarchal system. Nowadays, we have a lot of same sex couples, even. So it really doesn't make sense to say it's always the male first and always the female second. In this particular system with the register style, it's the subject first, which is why I gave both pronouns when you get into the context, because it could very well be a female that is the one carrying on this particular lineage.
And you mentioned on and TOEFL. We have a few questions about what are some of the basic differences between the register style and an on and TOEFL style?
Two big differences, well, three actually. I mentioned the first, and that's which direction are you going? Register style, you're coming down from an early immigrant to a later, well, I'm sorry, I said immigrant, an early ancestor down towards the present. With an on and TOEFL, you're going backwards. You'll start with yourself or someone more recent and go back through their direct ancestors. So with register style, you may be treating multiple folks in every generation, whereas in the on and TOEFL, you're dealing with father-mother pairs going back, and you're not dealing with the siblings of each generation and the aunts and uncles and the like. So the other difference is going to pertain to numbering. We had just had that question about males coming first and then females. That is the case in on and TOEFL because, again, it's father-mother pairs. So the father gets one number and the mother gets the +1 number. And the numbering is a very mathematical system in the on and TOEFL that has to do with multiplication as opposed to just adding consecutive numbers like in the register style.
And then maybe one final question. Christina asks, how far forward in the family tree should you go? Do you stop before including living people?
That is a project by project decision, and it also depends on the folks that you want to add. Just keep in mind privacy, because the more detailed you are about someone who's currently living, the easier it will be for someone to find that person. So just keep someone's privacy in mind. That's why record releases have privacy laws for how recently something can be viewed. So just for politeness and respect, consider that when you're thinking about adding in the present. For myself, when I'm researching my own family and it isn't something that I am distributing, I obviously go to the most up to date because I am keeping track of what is happening currently in my family. But if I were to publish something, I would stop probably with, say, my grandparents' generation.
All right. Well, thank you again, Kyle. And I know there were several questions that we weren't able to get to. And I feel like anytime we talk about writing and publishing, we are swamped with questions. And we really appreciate that. Unfortunately, because of our time, we just can't get to all of them. If you are interested in scheduling a consultation, maybe for more one-on-one help with your research or writing project, feel free to reach out to consultations@nehgs.org. You can also use our Ask a Genealogist service, which is a free chat service available from Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you have a reference question about how to maybe notate something in your writing, or what is a certain notation within a register style or a register article that you find, what does that mean? You may want to use Ask a Genealogist, which again is free and open to the public. So thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support support of our members and friends around the world, please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to keep these programs free. And if you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs such as the Writing and Publishing Seminar coming up next month, visit us at americanancestors.org. Best of luck in your research and your writing, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.